A woman is at her best friend's wedding, but halfway through the ceremony, she gets a distress call from her boss. She drops everything immediately, leaves the wedding, and thinking something terrible has happened, she rushes to the hotel where he lived. But when she bursts into his room, the so-called life or death emergency is just him needing help picking out a suit. Realizing she's been played again, she impatiently picks one out for him. She has honestly lost count of how many times he's treated her like a maid. This time, she can't take it anymore, and she quits right on the spot. Lucy is a brilliant Harvard graduate who works at a legal aid center, providing assistance to ordinary people who need legal help. One day, ignoring the danger, she climbs onto a wrecking ball just to stop the construction crew from demolishing the local community center. Only after her friend persuades her does she finally agree to come down. She wants to preserve this century-old building that holds memories for so many, but unfortunately, the land has already been bought by developers to build a new commercial high-rise. Lucy argues with the foreman, not caring how she looks, but the foreman doesn't want to deal with this crazy woman and signals the driver to proceed as planned. As the wrecking ball slowly rises again, and everyone watches as the community center faces destruction, Lucy is frantic. She plays her final card, grabbing yoga mats and lying down with her friend, vowing to protect the center with her body. Realizing he can't risk hurting them, the foreman is forced to call the police. Eventually, Lucy's parents bail her out, but despite all that chaos, she wasn't able to change the outcome. Her parents tell her the man behind it is George. His company specializes in old neighborhoods, and now even her own community was also one of their targets. But in reality, George was just a figurehead. On paper, he was a successful tycoon and a dashing playboy, but the truth was, every decision at the company was made by George's older brother. His brother could strip him of everything with a single word. So, George just decided to enjoy the ride. His brother told him to hire a new legal counsel, someone to handle the daily grind. One day, Lucy waited outside George's office building. She wanted to talk to George directly about the community center. When Lucy saw him walk out, she marched right up to him, introduced herself, and stated her business, learning that Lucy was a lawyer and a top Harvard grad to boot. And since he happened to be in the market for a counsel, he was intrigued. He usually mocked do-gooders like her, believing money was the answer to everything. He invited Lucy into his limo to talk. George offered to hire Lucy as his chief counsel, but she turned him down flat. She didn't want to get mixed up with a playboy, but he handed her his card anyway and asked her to think it over. Lucy didn't care about fame or money, but seeing the people at the community center so happy and content, and the kids having a safe place to grow, a warm smile crossed her face. After thinking it through, Lucy accepted the job, and so, Lucy became George's chief counsel. Lucy's brilliance and efficiency quickly impressed her boss, but soon enough, she realized he was pathologically indecisive. To help him make a choice, she even licked the envelopes to test the glue. George gave it a try too, looking confused. 6 months later, George relied on Lucy for absolutely everything. From picking out a mattress, he dragged Lucy along for every decision. In his eyes, Lucy was the one person who could solve every problem. Late one night, while Lucy was sound asleep, George called her up, completely disregarding the hour. It turned out, he needed Lucy's help getting rid of a date. He signaled for the girl to take the phone. Lucy's tactic worked like a charm. The girl took the hint and quickly left George alone. With Lucy's help, George's divorce, which had dragged on for 3 years, finally came to a close. They found leverage against his ex-wife, pointing out that she had also been unfaithful during the marriage. She had planned to extort a massive settlement from George, but now that scheme was ruined. She lashed out at Lucy, screaming insults, and even threw a bottle of water on her. Having dealt with the ex-wife and resolved that mess, George admired Lucy more than ever. They went shopping for clothes, and George asked for Lucy's opinion on absolutely everything. Lucy couldn't believe it. She was supposed to be his legal counsel, but she had turned into his personal nanny. She protested to George, reminding him to draw a line between work and private life, but George didn't take a word of it to heart. This 24-hour, on-call job was completely draining her. One day, she managed to sneak away to attend her best friend's wedding, but halfway through the ceremony, she received a distress call from George. She immediately dropped everything and rushed to the hotel where George was staying. That leads us back to the opening scene. Lucy began interviewing with other companies, but she was rejected every single time. She learned from one interviewer that George had already given them a heads up, telling them not to hire her. After being turned down by multiple firms, a furious Lucy stormed in to see George. But then, George pulled out the contract she had signed back in the day. It stated that until the building project was complete, Lucy couldn't leave the company. This allowed George had found another way to keep Lucy under his thumb. Lucy took the contract to a colleague, and even showed it to her father, a lawyer, hoping to find any any loophole, but even after consulting industry experts, they couldn't find a single flaw. With no other choice, Lucy had to obediently return to work. Since she couldn't simply quit, she decided to make George fire her. She deliberately showed up an hour late for a meeting, but George didn't seem to care at all. She even spit her gum on the carpet on purpose, which George's brother stepped right into. George knew Lucy was doing it intentionally. Seeing that her passive resistance wasn't working, Lucy finally lost her patience and dragged George into the restroom. She complained that she was on the verge of a breakdown. Seeing how desperate she was to leave, George realized he had no choice. He finally agreed to her request, but on the condition that she find a suitable replacement. Before she could go, thrilled to finally be escaping, she gave George an excited hug, but in that moment, she felt a sudden, strange spark. After that, while continuing to work for George, Lucy began scouting for a suitable replacement. During a site inspection, they happened to run into Lucy's parents. Her father invited them over for his special homemade cake. Lucy took George up to the roof, her childhood secret hideout. She loved standing there, gazing at the view, where she could see the beautiful coastline and the crowds bathed in the sunset. That place held so many precious memories for her. That was exactly why she fought so hard to prevent the community center's demolition. Beneath her tough exterior lay a kind and tolerant heart. George was genuinely moved by her words. Later, Lucy helped George interview new assistants, but George kept inadvertently offending them. Most people would just swallow their pride and endure the teasing, but one lady wasn't having any of it. Lucy tries to deflect the "what baby?" remark, as George plays dumb to gloss over it, and they manage to dodge a bullet. Luckily, the lady doesn't press the issue. George swears off ever sitting in on interviews again. While they discuss the applicant's qualification, their hands are busy, expertly picking the hated food off each other's plate, spending day and night together. Although they never talk about feeling, their chemistry suggests they are a couple, deep in the honeymoon phase. One day, Lucy, who suffers from seasickness, and her sailing-obsessed boyfriend decide to break up. She buries herself in work to vent her frustration. To help her feel better, George invites Lucy onto his yacht to unwind and teach her how to conquer her seasickness. They have a heart-to-heart about their lives. Although Lucy acts tough on the surface, deep down, she's like any other girl, yearning for an unforgettable romance, but she always ends up getting burned. Lucy gets completely wasted on the boat. The next moment, she kisses George. As their lips meet, George feels an unexpected spark of affection. George takes Lucy back to her apartment and thoughtfully adjusts her pillow. Just then, Lucy lets out a deafening snore. Surprisingly, George isn't put off. He actually finds this side of her adorable. When Lucy wakes up, she panics, thinking something happened with George last night, but having blacked out, she remembers nothing. George assures her that nothing happened, and Lucy finally breathes a sigh of relief. Then, a blonde, blue-eyed woman comes in for an interview. Like Lucy, she's a Harvard Law graduate. She's clearly done her homework and is well prepared. She constantly flatters Lucy, but due to her lack of experience, Lucy intends to turn her down. However, George is instantly captivated and hires her on the spot without Lucy's consent. Lucy intended to ask George to a baseball game, but here's June expressing a keen interest in it, and the team she casually mentioned. It happened to be the very team George loved. This gave George an instant sense of connection with her. They started chatting up a storm, completely ignoring Lucy on the sideline. Bubbly and outgoing, June was a hit at the office, and even George couldn't stop singing her praises. This made Lucy feel threatened like never before. One day, they all went out for a company team-building event. What started as a friendly foursome turned into a head-to-head showdown. Lucy refused to lose to the newbie, while June saw Lucy as a rival for George's affection. The two traded fierce volleys, but Lucy eventually took the fall. Lucy, oh my God, Lucy, are you okay? After recovering, Lucy had to sit out and rest. Watching their cozy interaction, she felt a knot of jealousy tightening. She ended up taking her frustration out on the food. Sure enough, on the ride back, Lucy's stomach started acting up, but they were still 30 minutes from the city and stuck in gridlock traffic. George teased Lucy, saying he wouldn't mind if she went right there, but Lucy had her dignity to maintain. Luckily, George spotted an RV up ahead. He rushed Lucy over to the vehicle. The explosive sounds that followed stunned everyone into silence. George tried awkwardly to make conversation. As soon as the flush sounded, the traffic magically cleared up. In the end, George had no choice but to watch his car get towed by the police. Stranded because of her emergency, Lucy felt incredibly guilty, but George stayed upbeat, comforting her and cracking jokes to cheer her up. He then called in a helicopter to pick them up. As the chopper circled above the city, and they gazed down at the stunning view, George spoke passionately to Lucy about the skyscrapers he loved so much. These buildings embody his dreams and hard work. Listening to his story, Lucy finally let go of her prejudice. Perhaps beneath that playboy exterior lies a sensitive and caring heart. Under the guise of work, June kept finding ways to get close to George. When she learned from him that he was attending a charity benefit that night, June feigned intense interest, then coyly pretended to walk away. George saw she was interested and immediately invited her to join him. Her plan of success, June used dropping off a report as an excuse to gloat in front of Lucy. This sparked a sudden pang of jealousy in Lucy. On the way to the benefit, George received an urgent call from his brother. He rushed over to see him, only to receive some bad news. A new assessment report stated that construction on the tower had to start immediately, and the community center had to be demolished to keep costs down. Otherwise, they risked losing their entire fortune. He had already made a promise to Lucy, but now he was facing a cruel reality. George was caught in a dilemma. At the benefit, George ran into fellow tycoon Donald Trump. Hearing that George's top counsel was leaving, Trump threatened to poach Lucy. George looked preoccupied and troubled. Suddenly, he spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Lucy had arrived, dressed to the nines. Her stunning appearance completely captivated George. A surprisingly bashful Lucy put on a red clown nose to break the tension, but George gently took it off. Just as George was about to speak, June showed up at the worst possible moment. She complimented Lucy's dress, then deliberately let slip that the community center was being torn down. Hearing that the center was doomed, Lucy instantly realized that George had broken their deal. Lucy angrily drags George away. George tries frantically to explain. He argued with his brother late into the night about it, but he couldn't change his brother's mind. Lucy storms off in anger. George feels completely powerless, but with the family business at stake, he has no choice but to listen to his brother. A rift begins to form between George and Lucy, giving June the perfect opportunity to swoop in. When the elevator doors open, she feigns hesitation, lingering on purpose. George instantly sees through her act. Meanwhile, Lucy arrives at the hotel. She wants to discuss with George if there's any way to salvage the community center, but when she walks into George's suite, she finds the two of them in a compromising position. Lucy awkwardly explains that she has a date to get to anyway. She walks out of the hotel alone, heartbroken. Late that night, she goes to her best friend's place to return some shoes. Her childhood friend can tell at a glance that something is weighing on her. Lucy finally breaks down. Although she only worked with George for a year, he relied on her for absolutely everything, and over time, that feeling of being needed gave her a sense of purpose. Without even realizing, George had slowly taken over her entire heart. It wasn't until she saw him with someone else that she clearly understood her own feeling. Lucy's last day arrives all too quickly. The office holds a small farewell party for her to thank her for her help and dedication. Just as Lucy is packing up to leave, June accuses her of taking company property, and a heated argument breaks out. George rushes over to pull them apart. He takes Lucy into the break room, intending to explain to her what actually happened the other night, but Lucy just keeps emphasizing that he promised not to tear down the community center. The moment the words leave her mouth, she immediately regrets it. He clearly couldn't bear to let Lucy go, yet he ended up pushing her even further away. After quitting, Lucy returned to her solitary life. She went back to work at the legal aid center. Ever since Lucy left, George has been like a lost soul. Then one day, at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new community building, he lacked the confidence he had when Lucy was by his side. For the first time, he defied his brother's wishes and went to find Lucy at her workplace. He pulled out the very first speech he had written himself and read it out loud to her. He hoped this confession would win her back, but Lucy still seemed angry. Dejected, George walked out of the legal aid center. After he left, Lucy burst into tears. Her coworker couldn't stand seeing her like this, so Lucy jumped up and chased after him. George. The two lovers ran toward each other and held each other tight because George had defied his brother's orders. He was now left with nothing, but Lucy didn't care about any of that. True love isn't about molding someone into what you want them to be, but helping them become the best version of themselves. It's not about one changing the other, but acknowledging differences and imperfections and still accepting them wholeheartedly while supporting one another.